Hi everybody, welcome back to part 2 with the Diana Storm Rider. As I said earlier, this is for the beginner PCP shooter trying to figure out his rifle, see what he needs to do. My leak test lasted a little bit longer than I had anticipated. Instead of being an overnight test, it was 4 days. And I'm showing 185 bar. Now I filled up to approximately 200 bar, and so there's a slight drop there. Two reasons for this. The first one is I had the gun in the house and it was probably a higher pressure since the tube was warmer. It's been outside. The weather has changed drastically over 4 days. This morning it was 10 degrees outside. Pretty cold. So just being outside, getting ready to shoot this video, it's cooled off and it's dropped some pressure. The other reason is, I shot it. I couldn't wait, and so I shot it right after I filmed the last episode, and I refilled it afterwards. So I may have refilled it a little fast since I'm using a bottle, but the leak test is what I was really looking for. And if this was leaking, it wouldn't be hovering around 200. It would be down to like 100, 75, 0. I mean, it would be a drastic difference. So this passed the leak test, and that's good. So now today, we can get to shooting it. How do you tell when to stop shooting with a rifle like this? Now, I've got a chronograph, and I could just put the chronograph out there and shoot it and just say, okay, here is this shot to that shot and done. But, like I said, this is geared towards the beginner, and you may not have that. So, I want to show you how to do it without a chronograph. What are you going to do? How are you going to learn your rifle and what your rifle's telling you without a chronograph, without all the fancy equipment? I do have a target set up at 25 yards, and so that's going to be my first 0. Guys, I said 25 yards as a first 0. I usually zero mine out at 50 yards, and that's my second 0. And what that means for you guys starting out is gravity. They've got this little thing on Earth called gravity, and as soon as your bullet leaves the barrel, gravity is pulling it down. So to combat that, you're already going in a forward motion, but to combat that pull, you're basically shooting the rifle up in comparison to how the scope is looking. So here's an example. Your line of sight, this is what you'd see through the scope. It's a perfectly straight line. Your barrel is slightly pointed up. So when you shoot, it's going to be a while. Since your scope is not mounted in your barrel, it's high. It's going to be a little while till that pellet comes up and intersects that line that you're looking through. That's your first 0. For me, on my rifles I shoot all the time, this is usually around 18 yards. So it crosses over, and then somewhere in, say, 30 yards-ish, I'm actually going to be shooting my crosshairs. I'm going to put them below what I want to hit. Okay, so my crosshairs are down here. My point of impact is way up here. Now, gravity's pulling that, all the time pulling that, and it's going to come back down to your second 0. That's the second point where those two intersect. And for me, that's 50. That's where I zero my rifles, is at 50 yards. And after that is when you're going to start putting your crosshairs higher and higher and higher above what you want to hit. So I've got my target set up 25 yards. And here's another tip for new shooters. You can go out and spend money on shooting C's and paper targets and stuff, and they're a lot of fun. But if you're doing a lot of shooting and just grouping, get a can of spray paint and find a piece of metal, because you can shoot a bunch of groups and then spray paint over it and shoot more groups, spray paint over it, and you're not spending money. You just keep shooting the same piece of metal. I'd say 3/16 or 1/4 inch would be plenty thick enough. Sorry guys, the scope cam mount didn't work. The bolt was running into it, so sorry, no through the scope this time. 22 caliber 18 grain JSBs. Load one in, safety off. We're pointing it in the safe direction. And we'll take a shot. Seems like it was a little bit to the right. So if my point of impact hit to the right, the scope dial here, I'm going to want to move my point of impact to the left. So I'll give it a couple of clicks. It's got a bit of a crack to her. Backyard friendly? I don't know. So what happened there, guys, was I had a point of impact change. They rose up a little bit. And what's going on inside the barrel is it's a clean barrel. And it's doing what's called leading. And I'm leading in the barrel by shooting it. And this is going to take me probably 40, maybe even 60 shots to lead in the barrel. So what I'm going to experience along the way is my point of impact might change a little bit. It'll be pretty close, but it may wander a little bit as the rifle gets leaded in. So you want to remember that as you're getting these first shots out. You might be chasing a zero back and forth and you don't know why, and it could be just that. It's got a bang to it, so I'd be hard pressed to say backyard friendly. I'm going to move out to 50 yards and see how it does out there. Guys, I think I stated it in the first video. I don't expect this to be a 50-yard gun or a 75 or 100, but you know, I'm going to shoot it out there just to see what it does. So what you're going to find when you move out to a farther range, if you're new to air guns and PCPs, is your point of impact is going to drop, okay? And that's normal because your pellet's going out further and it's going so slow that gravity's pulling it down. That's what that whole chart thing was about. So I adjusted my scope accordingly so that I can, that point of impact is at that crossover point. So now I can actually start shooting groups. Oh yeah, she's wandering a bit. One thing I'm doing as I shoot these different ranges and, you know, learn my scope and learn my rifle and trigger pull and all that is I'm writing down how many shots I'm taking. And there's a reason for this. You're going to run out of air at some point. And when you do, your bullets are going to start dropping drastically. And if you don't know what that is, which you won't with a new rifle, you're going to start chasing it. And you'll find that you keep dialing in and it just keeps dropping lower and lower. That's when you want to check and say, oh, you know, what's my pressure at? So I've had about 16 shots, give or take. And I'm down to 100 bar. I started at 185 and I'm down to 100 after that. So 100 bar for me, that's usually where I fill up. But I'm trying to learn this rifle and you want to know what pressure does that drop off happen. I'm going to move out to 75 yards. I'm going to guess about a mil dot down. Oh, we got 1.75. Swing and a miss. Okay guys, I'm out at 100 yards. This is my 100-yard setup. I feel like I have no business shooting this rifle at 100 yards. But I'm going to go for it anyway. I expect a group about this big. We'll see what we get. One reason I'm shooting out at 100 yards is it's going to tell me a little more clearly exactly when these shots start to drop off for lack of pressure. I'm going to go for 3 mils down. And it looks like 4 mils down. So I think I'm past 4 mils down at, what am I at here? 9 times zoom. But I may be dropping off my pressure already. Yeah, okay. Okay, that is 50, about 75 bar. And I think I'm dropping pretty heavily. I'm right at the green and yellow line right now. Guys, I can also hear a difference in the way the gun is shooting. Instead of just bang, it's like ba-dang. It's got this extra little sound going on to it. So I think I might have dropped again. I want to shoot one more, and then I'm calling it. Yep, we're off our pressure. So guys, we're back to the chart for illustration purposes. I've got 3 lines going on here. This one in the middle, the straight one, represents my shots. And I've got it marked for every 5. This red line represents the pressure in the rifle. And then this curved line represents the speed that the rifle's shooting the bullets, the pellets. And you'll notice that it starts out slow and then it rises, peaks, and then comes back down. Kind of, you can see in the background here, kind of like our shot does through the air. So why is that happening? Let me try to explain it. Inside your rifle there's a hammer, and that hammer hits a valve. The valve opens, lets the air out, which pushes the bullet out, and then it closes again. Otherwise you'd lose all your air. And so I kind of think of that as something like this. You know, I mean, this is a bolt and a spacer, but your hammer hits the valve, it opens, all that air rushes through, and then it shuts again. And then next shot, bang, it opens, the air rushes through, and it shuts again. Now whether that's spring pressure or air pressure, it's usually spring pressure back here, but it's assisted by the air. And when you have a lot of air behind this valve, it's going to open and it's going to slam shut fast. When your pressure back here starts to drop, this valve is allowed to stay open just a little bit longer, microseconds longer, but that's allowing more air to get through, so your shots are going faster. The third part of that is where your air pressure is starting to drop off behind the valve. And so your valve opens and it's allowed to stay open longer, like in here, except you don't have the pressure behind here, so not as much air is rushing through, and so not as much air is pushing your pellet down the barrel. So this is the type of shot string that you'll get with an unregulated rifle. If you bought a PCP with a regulator in it, that regulator's job is to straighten this line out as flat as possible, no matter what the pressure is, down to a certain amount. No matter what the pressure is, it's going to flatten that line. So your shots are more consistent downrange, and you don't have to expect these shots to kind of waver. Now my last shots were out at 100 yards. And this gun, it's not meant for 100 yards. Guys, it's really not. That's just me playing around. But it really showed me right away that my pressure was dropping off. Because the bullet's got to get all the way out there, and it has less and less pressure with each shot. So my shots were dropping immediately, and I caught onto it almost immediately. So what does all this mean to you, the shooter? How does this work? I mean, what are we talking about? What we're talking about is a starting pressure and an ending pressure. And more importantly, the ending pressure in this case, because I didn't start totally full, I started a little bit low. This next round I'll start filled up all the way. And what I'm going to do is I'm still letting in the barrel, I'm still seasoning the barrel, if you will. So I'm going to count down to 25 shots. And at 25, I'm going to start really paying attention to, are my shots starting to drop off? And that's going to tell me, that's going to zero in on that pressure. And I think it's somewhere about 100 bar is where I need to stop shooting. So that's going to give me my low end. What I'm going to watch on the high end when I first start shooting is I'm going to watch my point of aim. Say it's right here at this intersection. My bullets will hit down here somewhere, and they'll slowly rise as this pressure behind the valve decreases. So I may not want to shoot this gun filled all the way, all the time. I may want to shoot at 185 and drop it down to say 100. Just throwing numbers out there. But I'm going to watch what happens at 200. I want to see how low those pellets are. It may not be a huge difference. Okay, you might be fine starting at that full max 200. I'm expecting about 25 shots out of this rifle. So let's see what happens. So guys, you don't need to shoot at 100 yards. That's more me just being me. I want to see exactly every detail I can about this rifle. And 100 yards shows me a little more detail than, say, 50 yards. You could get away with this and you'll get a lot more shots probably at, say, 40 yards or 30 yards. Alright, 25 rounds. And what I'm going to do is, once I get on target out there, I'm going to aim at the same spot every time. And that's going to give me a little more feedback. And I'm still letting in the barrel. So, again, if the pellets wander around a lot, you know, it's a lot of different things playing into that, but I'm not too concerned with it right now. Now, if I get, you know, 4 or 5 magazines down and I'm still wandering all over the place, I'm going to start being concerned then. Now, my last shot was almost at the bottom line. It was almost at 5 mils down. Let's see where this one ends up. So my first round, I said, hey, let me start at 3. This thing just landed at the very top of the target at 3 mils. I'm shooting out a window, guys, and I'm getting a lot of feedback from this rifle, so I'm putting it in earplugs. Okay, so we're down with another bottle full of shots. They're going down range, and I learned a lot this time. I'm watching the barrel let in. You guys can't see it because you're not looking through the scope, but I'm watching through the scope, and I know when I pull around with this rifle, and I can feel it, and I threw a couple off, but I'm watching those bullets starting to tighten up. So I know my barrel's letting in because they're getting tighter from what I'm seeing. I know you guys saw a group that was this big. But I learned a lot of other information about the rifle. This time we started at 200 bar, and we went down to, I think I'm at 95. Yeah, 95. Oh, it's sitting in the sun. Yeah, 95 bar. So somewhere in this neighborhood, but You know, these lines, I didn't redraw them. These are the old lines, just for illustration purposes. But what I learned was I was taking notes. And what I learned was that when I started shooting, I was shooting right here at 3 mils. They were landing, you know, off in that neighborhood. And it did that for 3 shots. And then it went up to 2.5 mil. Okay, and for you guys that don't know, each one of these dots is a mil dot. You can do a little Google search on that. I'll tell you all kinds of information. So that was a 2.5 mil, and that looks like it was for 10, 11, 12, 13 shots I was in this neighborhood. And then I went back down to 3 mil. Now what that's telling me is, let's say 3 mil, my first couple shots was, say, right around here. Never mind the power, you know, never mind this stuff. But 3 mil, let's say it was right about here. And I went up on my reticle, so I'm more power. So my shots are coming out faster. So kind of between this area and this area, I'm shooting at 2.5 mil. Then I drop back down to 3 mil, right about here. Okay, and that was for 5 shots. And I'm also looking at my pressure during this time. So at 185 bar, I was at 2.5 mil. Somewhere in my 3 mil area, I hit, number 17, I was at 150 bar. And now 3.25 is shot number 22. Shot number 23 to 25. Now I'm going down to, you know, this was 3.25. This is now 3.5. Okay, 3.75. I'm dropping. That's my pressure loss. My pressure's dropping. My shots are dropping way out there, way out at range. And finally shot 29. I was at 4 mil dots way down here. So you can see the difference here, guys, between, you know, the peak and the low spot when I stopped. So what all this stuff kind of means and tells me is that this rifle would like to be shot between 185 bar and somewhere in about 135 bar, giving me approximately 15, let's say 20, somewhere like 20, maybe 23 shots of consistency. Again, that doesn't mean that I can't fill it to 200, and it doesn't mean I can't shoot it past 135. It just means it's going to be happiest and it's going to be the most accurate between 185 and 135. And so that tells me that this is about a 20-shot gun, which is kind of what I expected out of this rifle, was about a 20-shot gun. Because of the small reservoir, it's having a harder time dealing with the pressure changes, and so the shot curve is a little more extreme. So now that I know a little bit more about this rifle, and it's starting to get a little more accurate, I'm going to take it out and shoot it how I think it was more designed. In my opinion, a rifle like this is made for plinking fun. And that's what it's all about. Guys, I really think that's what this rifle was meant for. It's a great starter PCP. It's a great youth rifle. It's just fun to have to take out in the yard and plink. You know, shooting tin cans and stuff like that, and just having a great time with your friends and your family. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, whatever you feel like doing, to try to generate enough funds through my YouTube to pay for this so I can give it to one of you. I want to thank you for watching episode 2, and as always, happy shooting.